Sales objections are common. You will hear a lot of them. And finally, you will understand that human fantasy has no limits and most of them don't make any sense. So your client only takes these arguments to be true that support his point of view and ignores those that contradict with what he believes. Having been professionally involved in sales for almost 20 years, I've seen a lot. And be sure that if you're able to present an offer tailored to your client's needs or solution to the problem and establish an instant rapport, you will be able to close virtually any sale. Sale will just come out naturally. Closing a sale, you don't want to be perceived as a pushy sales guy and put pressure on your client, especially since most of the deals you are able to close without any effort. The first thing you need to keep in mind is that when you deal with a prospect who need to buy a product or service you offer, you don't need to be very inventive. Being persistent in achieving your long-term strategy is much more important. What you need to do is focus on a sales process. Take a look at the project in the construction industry as an example. Companies from electrical, hydraulic, ventilation, and finishing industries have deadlines in which must complete their work. The demand for materials, devices, and systems is clearly defined. It must be ordered and delivered just in time. Otherwise, companies will face unpleasant consequences and contractual penalties from the investor or general contractor. Contractors work according to the schedule and are paid upon completion of a given construction phase. It's a machine operating in a way that will purchase of materials will be done, regardless of whether you will be there or not. Companies order products and services at the right time, from the chosen supplier based on the received quotation, which are the best suited to their needs, demands, and requirements. You need just to be smart enough to press the right buttons in the right order to close a sale. Gathering information on the client's ongoing projects. Knowledge about the purchasing mechanism and who is personally involved are the key aspects influencing the successful closing of the sale in the most of the industries. The presented model will not appeal to everyone. It's for sure a kind of simplification. The main reason why some salespeople will not like it is that it puts closing techniques in second place. The fact is that many salespeople believe they have amazing selling and persuasive skills, while success comes from being in the right place and time with the right product. Don't get me wrong, this is one of the crucial skills in sales, perhaps even one of the most important. The ability to place yourself on the market and the right timing. Nevertheless, we must learn to distinguish between personal skills influencing sales success and market and product knowledge and building relationships. Salespeople define closing as the moment in the sales process when you finally ask your prospect for placing an order. Closing a sale can be direct or indirect. Professionals know and feel exactly when the time is right. Closing has nothing to do with confidence and decisiveness. There are many factors that determine success. First of all, successful closing requires being in a continuous rapport with your prospect. Following this one rule reduces the risk of rejection to a minimum. These are rules of this game. You have to be smart. Closing in inappropriate time is simply foolish. The duties of purchasing department employee include gathering and evaluating quotations and assess of attractiveness of the offers submitted by potential suppliers. Internal regulations very often impose on the purchasing department the obligation to obtain at least several offers on the basis of which they can make a purchasing decision. Sales professional must be aware when the time is right, and there is no clear answer for that because every situation is different and requires individual approach. But of course, there are transactions when the client's decision-making process is not so strict and you need to prove yourself and show your closing skills. Most of the time, that happens when you offer a new, non-standard solution. Put simply, your client can live without your product and it has no big influence on its life or business. Perhaps it could streamline and improve the process, but your prospect doesn't know it yet. At this point, you cannot count on that sale will close itself. Even if you made a great product presentation and the client was impressed, most likely he will procrastinate as long as the emotions fall down and he forget about you and your product. For a very simple reason. Procrastination is part of human nature. This kind of sale requires more decisive steps. You need to make your client feel that the quality of his life will decline, whether it's professional or privately, and make him feel high discomfort associated with lack of your product. When people crave and want something very much, their imagination tells them that their life will improve when they get it. That's what it's all about. Your client should feel discomfort and even some kind of mental pain in relation to further procrastination and lack of purchasing decision. The pain is the driving force that stands behind all actions and decisions people make. Understanding this mechanism is key to success, not only in terms of closing, but also in terms of made decisions in your life. Virtually every decision you make is conditioned by a willingness to avoid unpleasant consequences and feel good after. Let's say you pass a shop window and you notice the latest smartphone exactly as you have been dreaming for a while. Even the price doesn't seem too high. You can already see yourself with a brand new phone in your hand, surfing the internet, enjoying the latest features and innovations. Many positive images are running through your head. But suddenly, in a split of a second, you recall today's morning when you rebuked your girlfriend for the idea of buying a new pair of shoes, claiming that she already has dozens of them in the closet and some have never been taken out of the box. Like you told her that she should be more responsible and you have much more important priorities and expenses in the coming months. The images that are running through your head right now are very different from the previous ones. Consequences of buying your dream smartphone may be more unpleasant than the satisfaction of having it. Your girlfriend's possible negative response changes everything. You are giving up an idea of buying a new gadget due to the predominance of negative emotions you start to feel. Avoidance of unpleasant consequences and the mental pain related to thought of what may happen determines the decision. Every time you try to close a sale, think about it for a moment. The identification of your client's mental pains and fears is a crucial factor influencing purchasing decision. The client feels comfortable buying when his level of certainty is high enough, and this depends on his general tendency to taking risks and the movie playing on in his head. If there's a predominance of negative conclusions over the positive ones, the sale will not be successfully closed. Anything, even the smallest argument against which from your point of view may seem irrelevant, can be decisive, because it's not about the number of thoughts and strengths of arguments, but about general feeling. The client hesitation and procrastination result from the predominance of negative emotions over positive ones in his mind. It's your job as a professional salesperson to identify these uncertainties and neutralize them. Usually, these uncertainties refers to your product, to you as a salesperson, to your company, and to the environment where the client operates. Product may be tangible, intangible. Client's objection may refer to its quality, price, compatibility, functionality, or any other feature. Typically, different objections refer to high-volume products which constitute a significant part of clients' expenses, and different to low-volume but high-quality products. In the case of products representing a significant part of the company's expenses, price is usually one of the most important factors. While in the case of niche products, your client must have a good reason to engage and make effort to change the regular supplier. This group may involve technical problems and quality issues. Price is often set aside, and the key success factor is to provide the right solution and provide its utility. By delivering a product that represents a significant importance for your client business, you find yourself in a place where from the very beginning you have a better starting position. It results from the fact that the client is usually more eager for meeting new potential suppliers who, theoretically, can reduce the cost of business operation and is more open to hearing about new possibilities and opportunities. Arousing the client's initial interest and the approach is relatively easier. However, your success will largely be based on price and logistic capabilities. Arguments like quality and service are less important in this case and are a secondary thing, at least until a deeper relation is built. Although nowadays more and more sales are concluded online, the consumer is still a human being and building relationship is extremely important, especially selling business to business. If your client has two comparable offers, the human factor is the one that will determine his choice. People buy from people they like and trust. If you have good relations with your client, you will usually get all the necessary information to close the deal. You will learn how to prepare an offer to be competitive. What are the key issues you need to deliver to reach an agreement and on what you should pay attention. Knowledge of the key issues will allow you to prepare an offer that will give you a significant advantage over your competitors. Whether you will be able to meet all these expectations is a completely different matter. It's widely known that if a person from the purchasing department sympathizes with any supplier, will guide him and provide all necessary instructions so that he or she can successfully close the sale. Similar behaviors, of course, excluding all non-ethical ones, are emotional in nature. Buying from someone we don't like can cause discomfort. Client subconsciously evaluates all the pros and cons of every offer he gets. If the offers are comparable, he will choose the one behind our positive emotions and nice people. But if, for example, the price, quality, or any other key factor doesn't meet clients' requirements and expectations, despite the sympathy for the salesperson, the sale will not be closed as well. What is necessary is a balance between expectations and the human factor. Client may have had bad experiences with your company in the past, could have heard negative opinions in the market. In any of similar situation, even you have managed to build confidence in the eyes of your client to yourself as a sales consultant, closing the sale will still be very difficult. Rebuilding trust is not so easy. All depends on where you are in a position to be able to correct the mistakes made in the past. If your product, company, and everything what concerns their quality and reliability are on the same level as they were when the trust was compromised and you are not able to do something extra, you should better let go and look for a new client. The proper identification of the target group and the ability to position yourself on the market are key for your final success. If the client had a positive experience while working with your company, heard many good opinions, your company brand is recognizable and associated with high quality, closing a sale will be much easier. Even if the client doesn't know you personally, you automatically get a huge level of trust and credibility. Client's workplace is another important and underestimated element in the context of closing the sale. As a work environment, I mean the marketplace and the people who have an influence on your prospect. Building trust in you as a salesperson, your company and your product may not be enough if your client is afraid of negative judgment. Fear is especially real if so-called decision maker is afraid to make decisions and the reactions of people above and directly involved in the sales process. Some people are naturally reluctant to make decisions. If something is associated even with the smallest risk of negative assessment, they prefer to remain passive. Regardless of whether you are dealing with a high-tech or a small private company, you will often experience that if something works properly and your solution is mainly aimed at streamlining the process, it will be hard to find people willing to take action. Human beings are biologically programmed to conserve energy and not take action unless it's really necessary. It's hard to change the human nature. In fact, it rarely happens. So if you want to force someone to take action, you also have to rely on the instincts rooted in millions of years of evolution of human species. Fear can be both the factor that keeps people from taking action and the driving force behind taking action. If you're able to build the belief in your client's mind that procrastination will have a negative impact on their life, you'll be able to close any sale. Staying for a long time in an uncomfortable state of mind evokes negative emotions, discomfort, and eventually deep stress. Even the most stubborn and reluctant to change people start to act when they feel fear. Let's take as an example quitting smoking. The harmfulness of smoking and its devastating effect on health are well known. However, anti-nicotine campaigns and shocking photos placed on cigarette packets don't deter regular smokers. People who smoke for a long time get used to it, they become desensitized. Smokers generally feel that it doesn't concern them. Receiving a medical diagnosis that the effects of smoking will no longer be reversible and the possibility of developing cancer is real, at that point, a typical smoker begins to take the first step to quit a harmful habit. Will he succeed is a completely different story, but at least he tries as best as he can. This is the reason why you shouldn't try to immediately solve your client's problems, even if you and your product are able to do so. Instead, listen carefully and make sure you know all the details. Before you present a solution, paraphrase what the client told you to be sure that you understand everything correctly. Emphasize the issues that are a problem and amplify the pain. When client's discomfort reaches a critical level, it's time to close the sale. If you don't resist the temptation and you start by presenting the solution to the problem at the very beginning, your chances of successfully closing the sale will decrease dramatically. All decisions people make are emotional in nature. Emotions determine our actions. Logical arguments only support decisions already made in our subconscious mind. People need logic to explain their decision to the people around to feel better and justified. The moment you present solution to the problem, you take the burden of your client. But when he hasn't yet experienced real discomfort, it's all for nothing. If you give your client the feeling that the solution is at hand and that he can reach for it anytime, there's a high probability that the natural human tendency to procrastination will kill the sale. Therefore, timing and building uncertainty about the availability of the solution in the future is key to success. Put simply, if the risk is too high in the client's mind, fear begins to dominate and paralyze any action. I know people who buy a car on average every 2 years if the old one gets them bored. They just sell the old one and buy the new one. Buyers like that don't have to be 100% sure about the rightness of their decision, because if a new purchase doesn't meet their expectations, it will be quickly monetized and easily forgotten. The decision is made quickly and they are not afraid of negative consequences, or at least it doesn't play a big role. On the other side, there are buyers who see themselves as those who firmly keep both feet on the ground. They buy a new car no more than once in 10 years, and it's always a life decision, preceded by many months of reading automotive articles, comparisons of technical parameters, hours of talking to family and friends, discussing dilemmas and uncertainties. When they finally decide to buy their dream car, they are still not sure about the rightness of their choice. While the first buyer is the dream type of every salesperson, the second one is the biggest nightmare. Usually, you will oscillate somewhere in the middle. What you need to remember during the closing process is to reduce your client's fear threshold right after you intensify the pain in relation to the lack of your product. Sales objections are common, practically unavoidable. You will hear a lot of them. When you think you have heard them all, you will hear dozens of new ones. And finally, you will understand that human fantasy has no limits and most of them don't make any sense. In most cases, it's just a smoke screen, a client's lack of trust in your product, in your company, in you as a salesperson, or maybe just fear of negative opinion of people directly concerned. So treat objections as an opportunity to improve your skill set, not as a rejection. Try to understand the real motives behind the client's purchasing decision. Sales objections must be dispelled on an emotional level. Logical argumentation only supports existing belief system that has always deeper foundations. Your client's reticular activating system controls incoming information. So your client only takes these arguments to be true that support his point of view and ignores those that contradict with what he believes. It means most likely your client will be deaf to all arguments until he subconsciously believes in what you say. Salespeople are often disappointed when, despite they successfully dealt with the problem raised by their clients, indicated as the main obstacle to closing the sale, clients raise next objections. The reason is the lack of recognition of the real motives that drive your client. Solving the problem on a logical level that was only a smokescreen and excuse. Don't be afraid to ask difficult questions. Better to know the brutal truth and be aware of the real obstacles that stand in a way to closing a deal rather than try to solve imaginary problems and deluding yourself that you are a step closer to ultimate success when you overcome them. Lowering your client's threshold is nothing more than presenting an idea in a way that affects your client's emotion. Make it seem attractive and safe. The fear of making a wrong decision must be kept to a minimum. What you need to do is to change the movie playing in the client's mind to be more favorable and positive in relation to your business proposal. Keeping to minimum possible negative consequences is one of the ways to lower the client's pain threshold, and while it's rather impossible to eliminate all uncertainties and fears due to the human nature, you can still raise your client's general level of confidence. Good salesperson knows how to read non-verbal cues that indicate confusion and constantly looks for new ideas to close more deals. Let's say your prospect is still hesitating and not sure if the product will meet his expectation. You can, for example, suggest a pilot project where the risk is kept to a minimum and you are able to prove utility, offer a solution in practice, as well as draw the right conclusion and introduce improvements if they turn out to be necessary. In the case something goes wrong, it will not have a negative impact on the functioning of the whole prospect business. This strategy helps to dispel many concerns and objections. Because your prospect doesn't take much risk, will be more likely to buy and try a sample, and you will be one step closer to reaching your goal. If everything goes well, the client's objections will disappear and you will have an open door for the bigger sale. There are countless ways to lower a client's pain threshold. Basically, it all depends on your creativity. Literally, any number of sales objections make the same number of ways to overcome them. Regardless of what you sell, the key to a successful closing is the proper identification of obstacles. What you need to remember is that decisions people make are always emotional and they need logical reasons mostly to support their feelings. Justify the steps taken and explain to other people the cause for their actions. This is why your clients can be very selective about the arguments you present. If something doesn't suit their perception of reality, they will simply ignore it. When presented arguments support their point of view, they subconsciously accept them as a fact. Try to understand your client and put yourself in his shoes. This is a milestone in closing every deal. Ask questions to figure it out and look for arguments that can trigger your client's emotion. Although I often emphasize that sales is a transfer of emotion, it's not always desirable that your client is driven by them. Even if emotions are positive and theoretically work in your favor, sometimes you need to cool them down. And despite it may sound absurd in the context of what has been said before, things are sometimes more complex than we would like to see them. Sales professionals know that people tend to change their minds. Perhaps you have personally experienced a similar disappointment when a client who promised you to place an order failed to do so. It's certainly very frustrating, but before you start to blame and condemn anyone, remember the last time you changed your mind in a similar situation. Do you ever get excited about something, but the next day all the enthusiasm evaporates and you give up on your plans? What a day before seemed to be a good idea, it doesn't stimulate your imagination the next day. Doubts rise in your head and you don't feel it anymore. You don't believe it will work for you. Ultimately, you let go of all actions you decide to take. That's how emotions work, and that's why your prospect doesn't fulfill declarations made under the influence of them. Evoking the emotions of urgency to close a sale makes sense only in certain situations, usually wherever it's possible to close the sale immediately. The key is to take advantage of the moment when the client is impressed by the presentation that has just been carried out. But let's be honest, how many important decisions are made this way selling business to business? Most require thorough analysis, and decision-making process is structured in a way that requires the approval and acceptance of more than one decision maker. And although the sales closing effectiveness is the highest right after the presentation, it's rarely possible to take advantage of it. Moreover, its foundations are very fragile. Client's declaration of buying, triggered by the emotion, will not stand the test of time. When the client cools down and gets the distance to the certain things, he will probably start to procrastinate. That's why closing a sale must include an emotional and rational factor. To avoid the buyer's remorse that might arise the next day, it's necessary to present rational argumentation. By lowering the level of emotion and then emphasizing rational arguments, it's possible to eliminate sales objections that arise when the client's emotions fall. But be careful, because this contains an element of risk. If the balance will be disturbed, you may destroy everything that has been built so far. Put simply, it's about switching the client from a state of euphoria to a state where he has more emotional control, bringing to the light of the day the hidden objections that lurk in the back of his head. If you are talking to a client about buying a product that will be ordered in a week or month, it's obvious that the client's declaration of buying a product made in the heat of the moment is very fragile. The client's emotions about you, your company, and offered solution will change and will not be as strong as at the moment of making the verbal declaration. Because it's predictable, you can take preventive action, which means putting the client in a state of mind in which he will be in a few days or weeks, when emotions will subside and rational analysis of the pros and cons begins. Getting your client to make a decision on both the emotional and logic level greatly increases the likelihood of delivering on his promise. When finally the time comes to place the order, his internal state won't be different from the one in which he made the declaration. Emotions supported by logic will favor you. Your client will feel inner consistency and the deal will be closed successfully. Be careful though, because going too low from the state of excitement to more rational one can lead to a complete loss of interest in your offer. It's all about finding the right sweet spot. It's like landing a plane. You want to lower the flight from a high altitude, but you don't want to crash on the ground. It must be done skillfully and carefully. The plane needs to be smoothly put on landing strip. Keep that image in your mind every time you build a balance between emotion and logic in your client's mind.